Good morning, everybody. Good crowd. Okay, my name is Rowan Fogarty. I'm the COO of a company called VigiTrust, working in cybersecurity. I have a background in security consulting myself, physical security, aviation security, and cybersecurity over the years. The topic this morning is cyber resilience in the age of NIS2, strategies and best practices. I started trying to come up with a definition for cyber resilience over the last few days for myself, and I came up with something very simple, which I thought was far too simple. And I thought, detect the problem, fix the problem, then take steps to make sure that it doesn't happen again, and continue to improve your security. And I thought that was quite too simple. And I went away and looked for some other definitions, and indeed many of the regulations had big, long, complex definitions, and then Paul stood up this morning and kind of poo-pooed them and came up with his own, which is fairly similar to what I just said. So I don't think anybody here, needs to have cyber resilience defined for them. They know what it is, you understand what it is, what you do. But just for, I looked at it and thought about, in terms of the directive, it's that concept of risk assessment and identification. It's very much focused on the idea of looking at your supply chain and making sure that's secure and taking responsibility for the fact that it's secure, which then leads to the whole concept of incident notification and reporting, building and maintaining your zero trust architecture. And I suppose the thing that comes across quite often in terms of NIS2 is the increased focus on board-level accountability and compliance, which I would naturally refer to because my colleague in VigiTrust, the CEO, has written a book called The Cyber Elephant in the Boardroom and talks continually on this topic. If any of you have trouble sleeping, he'll gladly send you a copy of the book. It is easy for me to talk about this fairly glibly, but it is a challenge to implement and to maintain and improve and augment your cyber resilience on a continuing basis. So today we're going to hear from a number of experts who will provide insights as to some of the ways to go about addressing these challenges in line with best practices. And my colleagues over here, I'm going to attempt to pronounce some of these names. Morten Gammelgaard is from Bullwall. Will Gray is from Security Scorecard. Tristan Baitup is from Sonic Wall. And our Nick from Progress has not been able to join us, but Ekaterina Bonova has joined us and will do the presentation, and Bernard de Bosch, who is the Chief Product Officer from Cyber Elements. And I'm going to let them then introduce their topics and take you rapidly through the 5 presentations, and then we'll have a period at the end for some questions, which I expect there will be a lot because there's quite a full room. Okay, so Bernard.
Good morning or good afternoon. We're kind of in the middle of the day. Who amongst you have read the NIS2 directive? A few of you? Okay. I read it for you too. Here I'm going to focus on when you look at the directive in itself, it's first 150, something like that, topical paragraphs about, recommendations, definitions, findings, observations, and so on. And then you've got the key articles. And most of the articles regard the building of an ecosystem. So first, it is the building of an ecosystem so that Europe becomes completely resilient when it comes to cyber security. And it describes the interactions between all the members, all the participants to these large ecosystems. But then you have a core article, which is the Article 21st, which gives the 10 key measures that essential entities and important entities have to put in place within their organization. And of course, it all starts with risk analysis in cybersecurity, but it regards, incident management, supply chain type of risk management, and so on. And from this key core Article 21, when you look at the way the NIS2 directive is incorporated into the national laws, you've got the first transpositions or transcriptions, I don't know the right word in English, the transcription of those measures and into key objectives in the national laws. And we could have access to the first kind of documents because you know that the countries have to transpose the law into before October this year. And so it's broken down into 4 main areas: governance, protection, defense, and resilience. So resilience is one aspect, I would say, of this global kind of framework. And I think the 5 of us will address different aspects of those objectives. So 10 measures, Article 21, 20 objectives, governance, defense, resilience, protection. And I'm going to focus on the protection area, because that's where we can show how some of the technology can contribute to the meeting of those objectives. And when you look at the protection area, you can break it down into 3 key main areas. What regards the architecture, it's all about where we speak about regulated IT system, and it's all about the partitioning, the fact that you have, for example, an IT system for the administration that is separated from the IT system from the regulated production system. It's all about how you manage the remote access. And it's interesting that the Article 21 mentions some of the kind of next generation capabilities like multi-factor authentication, continuous authentication, like zero trust type of technologies for remote access. Also, you can protect against malicious code, which is all the protection against ransomware, malware, and so on. Or you manage the configuration of your regulated IT resources. Then you got another segment which regards identity and access management. It breaks down into identification, authentication, and access rights, and I'm going to detail that further. And then the whole set of objectives around the administration of the regulated IT system. All the administration accounts, the fact that you need individual accounts, the whole security around the Active Directory or your IDP, the reference directory for the identities, and then the administration dedicated resource, the fact that you have to dedicate resources to administer your regulated IT system. So the device must be dedicated, the network must be dedicated, the operating system has to be dedicated, and so on. These are the way the objectives are defined in the transposition of the NIS2 directive into the different national laws, I would say. I'm going to now look at how you can, through technology, meet or contribute to meet those objectives. And I'm going to start with the architecture part. So first, you need to put in place an architecture which protects. What does it mean? And I'm referring here. You've got a number of the objectives, and each objective is really broken down into sub-objectives, and it's very detailed. But in terms of partitioning, how the technology can contribute, for example, if you partition, you've got large organizations which have a regulated IT system and a non-regulated IT system. So you've got to isolate the two. You've got to segment the two. It can be a multi-tenancy through multi-tenant architecture. It can be a multi-organization architecture. You also have to segment the network. So you can do it with different gateways, different put in place the different VLANs and so on. When you look at when you have to update or transfer files or data to the regulated system, and when this data comes from internet, when you have to upgrade, for example, an operating system in the regulated system, you have to fetch the file on the vendor side, for example. You have to put in place exchange zones so that you've got exchange zone connected only to the internet and exchange zone connected only to the regulated IT system. And between those exchange zones, you need to put in place only file transfer, one-way transfer diode. I'm not sure the word in English is correct. Diode is an electrical analogy. Okay, that's the kind of architecture you have to put in place. You cannot open a session between these two zones. Okay, for file transfer. When it comes to third-party access, you avoid clients, agents on the workstation of your partners. You, for example, you leverage virtualization technology to isolate the terminal, the end-user terminal, and the IT system, so that you have a protocol break in the middle, for example. You have to force to go through the remote access technology or to the bastion, to the privileged access management server to access to the system. Of course, you've got to protect your secrets. For example, you have to make sure that you don't disclose secrets to third party. Okay, so the third party providers the access to your remote access system, and once they have access to the system with multi-factor authentication and so on, they don't have to know any other password to access any critical asset on your regulated system. And then you have a set of what we qualify zero trust capabilities, like we know the zero trust is least privilege, just-in-time privilege, zero standing privilege, but it can go to least connection, just-in-time connection, zero standing connection. That means that you connect to the resource only when you use the resource. You don't open access, or you don't leave a tunnel open to the resource or connection open to the resource if you're not using it. The tunneling technology is also very helpful in this area. You can also, for example, have URL rewriting. It's an interesting technology where you do not expose web applications to the internet. That means that every URL of your applications is rewritten so that the URL that appears in the browser of the user cannot be used outside of your remote access solution, and so on. So these are really technological capabilities that can help meet those architecture requirements, objectives from NIS2. The second area relates to identification, authentication, and access rights. And of course, it relates to the management of the identity of who access to your regulated IT systems. And it's all about the management of the users, the accounts, and the entitlements of those users into your system. So it's the provisioning of users, accounts, and rights. Is the deactivation or the provisioning and deprovisioning of the accounts and of the rights for just the duration of the use of the resource, for example. When it comes to authentication, of course, in the Article 21 is mentioned multi-factor authentication or even continuous authentication. That means it can be user behavioral-based authentication that you can continuously check. That means that you must know who is behind the screen during the whole session. It's not because the person is authenticated that it's still the same person behind the screen when the authentication has been passed. Then you have the whole topic about password management, password policy management, password rotation. Even if you don't disclose passwords to your third party, it is really important that for the passwords that you manage yourself or that the solution manages itself, that you rotate the password for security reasons. And also the ability to manage different types of directories, IDPs, whether your AD in the cloud, or a third-party IDP, your own IDP, local directories, and the ability to use all those directories. And of course, when it comes to, I'm going to come back on this one for the PAM. Then the last one is the privilege access part, the whole management of who administers the regulated system, which with accounts, with rights, are those rights, how are those accounts and rights provision, deprovision, and so on. And there, it's all about also protecting the privileged accounts, the actions that are performed on the resources, the protection of the secrets, and so on. For the sake of time, I'm going to be quick on that one. And I'm going to show a kind of a simple view of a NIS2 compliant architecture for example, remote access or PAM access. On the right-hand side, you've got the regulated IT system. On the left-hand side, you've got the administration IT system to administer the regulated system. In the bottom, you see the exchange zones, and you have to go through those type of exchange zones for exchanging data in a secure manner. And then you've got the device, the workstations, internal workstation for the company which administers your regulated system, and the workstation of your external third parties, for example. And you have to put in place an architecture which meets those NIS2 specific either recommendations or articles and so on. So the zero trust principle is a good one to counter supply chain attacks and ransomware attacks. For example, you've got no client on the workstation. You check the workstation when you give access to a person, You got a minimum interaction with the end user workstation. You do protocol break. You leverage multi-factor authentication, continuous authentication. With what regards the passwords, you need a vault to apply policy, to do rotation and change the passwords. And for example, in protecting your assets, you don't open network ports to the outside. That means you do only outgoing flows. You can leverage volatile and random ports so that brute force attack have no grasp on your system. You can do, as I said, URL rewriting. These technologies help meet those objectives that are required by the NIS2 directive. Okay, so if you want to see an example of the technology, of course, you can meet us at booth 8, and you can try the Cyber Elements platform that you can instantiate in 3 minutes. You go to the website, you start now, and you have your platform 3 minutes away in production. That's it. The questions are later on, right? Okay.
Hello there. I'm Ekaterina. It's a little bit difficult name, challenging for some of you probably. So Kate will be the shortcut. Today I'm going to speak about NIS2 and what is changing from NIS. We have in place regulations from 2016 up until now. These regulations are legal framework, all of you know, which considers the cybersecurity. But now what's changing is that these legal frameworks are beginning to become more detailed and more like focused on what exactly measures entities should do, and also like expanding the categories of entities means pretty much every business can be part of a category. So the affected industries, it's not affected, it's not the right wording really, it's just the industries which are part of these regulations. There are many from the suppliers to some of the essential services like energy, transportations, healthcare, and so on, but down to like food production and something that it's not really, doesn't sound that heavy. How to minimize the challenges, implementing measures and obligations. So minimize the challenges, basically what are exactly the challenges and how to overcome that there. And how to cover the incident handling and reporting, which is one of the things that has been changed from the NIS regulation. So this is the change in regards of the categories. Previously, we have the so-called name critically sectors and the other critical sectors. This has expanded, significantly expanded. You see the banking and the financial industries, which are part of DORA, are also part of NIS2. So part of those regulations will respond, part of the entities will need to cover both of the regulations. That's not something, it sounds more like more big than it is, but in terms of framework, the entities which cover banking and will monitor banking and financial industries will cooperate together with NIS2 and DORA. The scope is expanded to different, as you can see, there's the post and courier services, manufacturing, the waste management, so many of digital providers. So like digital providers is one of the most important categories, which is new one. Why? Because this is not only a division by categories. The NIS2 makes also difference in the size of the business. So large entities with more than 2,050 employees and more than 50 million of revenue. Then the mid-size, which is from 50 to 250 employees and more than 10 million of revenue. And then there are the smaller entities. Why is this important? For the digital provider, so if you are a trusted service provider, if you are a domain name register, if you are in the digital provider service field, you are considered an essential provider of services. So that's one of the important things here. So baseline number of organizations which need to comply really expanded to dozens of activities. The important articles and why they are important, all the articles are important really, but the ones that need to be considered because they begin to become more detailed in terms of what measures should we do. The applications of security measures, they are really 10K measures, as my previous colleague has mentioned them. So there's nothing new to those measures. We know that we need to apply policies for accesses. We know that we need to use encryption. We know, so most of the things are things that already are existing there, but now we need to be compliant. And there's this list. We need to be compliant for that list of K policies. This is something that is new for NIS2. There were collaboration groups on a national level around every European Union country. They are publicly available. You can check them out. Why this is important to us as entities? Because now we will have these cybersecurity incident response teams. These are local authorities responsible for monitoring security incidents, but also these are the teams or entities that you need to report to in case of security event. So that's one of the things that has been changed with NIS2. You need to report to those security teams within locally present. For every country, there will be national teams in case even of suspected event. So you are suspecting that something is happening, you are reporting to them. They are in charge to help provide information, to help mitigate attacks, and also they are not only the monitoring entity, but they are also in charge to help in case of security event. Expansion of incident reporting obligation. Why this is like this? What's being changed is the timings. So the timings are really crucial here. 24 hours after first you know that something suspicious is going on. Even if you are not sure, even if not enough information, even if this is not confirmed, as probably many of you know, an attack can be from 60 to 200 days. For a ransomware attack, it might take 200 days to complete. So that means that in your network sits an affected machine or someone that tries to do harm, and that's 200 days. It's almost a year. That means 24 hours after you know suspicious activity is going in your network, you should inform the authorities. What's significant impact is the important word here, a suspicious activity that might have significant impact. So it's not that you have to report anything or it's not that, but for a significant impact, yes. 72 hours after confirming that this is happening. And the changes on the reporting side are what are the details that you need to provide. So if previously we as entities have like some visibility in what is going on around our network and our infrastructure, and we can provide some details, now we are obligated to provide many more details, like which is the source, all the timings within the attacks has happened, and many more details follow through. So that's one of the important things. Then you have 1 month after the incident, a complete report. Complete report means that you will need tooling for do that. That's not possible to be done manually, so it's like building a house manually, probably decades before us, people have done it, but now it's something that you are not able to do it in a month. So that requires some tooling to be able to provide, month after the incident, a complete report. And last thing for the previous one, that you need to know that the authorities have the right to also notify public if the incident is really significant. You can obligate for whoever is attacked to notify the public, but they also have the right to do it if the incident is significant. Increased fines and sanctions, that's to be considered. For the larger entities, is 2% of their worldwide turnover. For the important ones, so for the essentials is 2%. For the important ones is 1.4%. And that's in maximum, in numbers, up until 10 million for the first ones and up until 7 million for the second ones. But the penalties has always, or the sanctions has always been in place in terms of money. What has been changed here is, as my colleague said previously, the responsibility of the management. So that's one of the key points that is changed here. And even going in details, if an incident is seriously harmful for the people who you are serving to, so your clients or wide number of people, that means that really the responsibility on the management will be heavy and can reach to not being able to be on the position of manager for a certain time frame. So that's something that it's important. How to minimize the challenge? So these are the challenges. For the essential entities, for the important entities, there are some differences in both, but really this is something that will be effect 17th October this year. So this stands here in order to tell how to overcome. First steps is analyze a network. This is a simple graph of what usually is an infrastructure, how an infrastructure looks like, and what's the logic behind it. So you have your policies, you have your access policies, you have your endpoint protection, you have your systems in place, so you might have a CM or SOAR, an endpoint security for sure in place. You have your cloud security, and there the red one is the network security, which is the visibility. So that's one of the key points from the perspective of prepare yourself. Because even if you have in place the best endpoint protection or whatever you want to call it, or you have your systems in place, you have your policies set up, you need visibility. What you need really is visibility, because you need to know what's going on, you will need to have reports, you will need to know if something is happening, when this is happening, and what are the... So in order to know what to do, you need visibility. So that's the first step to prepare. Main components of the visibility is the tooling. The tooling is the one that can provide incident response, that can provide root cause analysis, that can correlate different types of events. Here are some of the key components of the 10th regulations that you need to comply. Some of them are not here. Why? Because they are considering the policy application, so the encryptions. So that's some of the key points which can be mitigated with tooling. The other ones needs just to be set up in place. So multi-factor authentication, encryption, policy of the accesses, you need to do that. You just need to do it. These are the ones that an NDR tooling can report for, monitor for, and create and give you all the visibility that you will need in certain point of time. Incident handling and reporting is one of the important changes in NIS2 directive. So how this should be handled and which reports you need to provide, because these are reports that you will need to have and provide. Not only, so for the essential entities, there's a slight change between essential entities and important entities. How is the change and what really means that the essential entities will need to be prepared for auditing. And this auditing is targeted and a regular auditing. So that means that the national entities will have the possibility to ask you for information, to ask you for reporting, and to ask you, okay, how do you comply? Give me a proof that you comply those 10 key points. And this is something that for the important entities can happen only after incident. For the essential entities can happen in any point of time that the authorities think that this is needed. So that's the steps to take in the direction of preparing yourself for NIS2 and having in place a system. This is something to tell you how exactly the automated attack mitigation is a process. What you will need to have in certain period of in certain point of time is integration with the national system of cyber incident response teams. So you will probably want to have a system that has a RESTful API or is capable for an integration. That's what we do at Progress, and that's the system that we have. It complies with those 7 out of 10 key points in order to help you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Tristan. I'm from SonicWall. I'm the channel director for UK and Ireland. Thanks to my previous colleague who mentioned that network security is one of the most important bits, because that's what we do. So that's really good. So a little bit about us before I start. So how many of you know SonicWall? Have heard of them? Excellent. This is brilliant. Okay, so 30 years, over 30 years we've been going as an organisation. We're a US-based network security company. Been in Ireland for over 20 years, worked with a number of managed service partners, and have a rake of end-user customers as well in Ireland. So really happy to be here today. A full end-to-end portfolio of products, and obviously that has, our portfolio has evolved. I've been with the business now about 9.5 years, and our portfolio has evolved purely because the threat landscape that we're surrounded by now has changed, and we've had to evolve our portfolio to suit that. Global threat intelligence network, so we're constantly monitoring and updating and monitoring our technology and monitoring the threat landscape 24/7. We're 100% channel, so we work through a network of partners, and I'll talk a bit about that in a minute, because I think when stuff like NIS2 comes along as a directive, it's really important for those of you in the room today that have got to consume all of this and then try and work out a way forward with it. Get yourself aligned to a partner, take away some of that heavy lifting. And we've got some really good partners that are here today as well. So, yeah, definitely be doing that. So let's talk a bit about setting the scene about the threat landscape in Ireland. So cybercrime is set to escalate in Ireland, driven by greater reliance on cloud and third-party providers. We've seen a lot of this since the pandemic. Cybercrime has continued to escalate in 2024, and this came from a report that PwC did. And a lot of the very, want of a better word, traditional methods that we're seeing, account takeover, email compromise, ransomware, human error. All of those areas are leading to a greater risk within the Irish market. 88% of Irish executives stated that their organisation had experienced a cyber attack since 2020 due to increased digital acceleration. And obviously post-pandemic or during the pandemic, everybody had to find a different way of working. So people were moved to a remote working overnight, and they necessarily didn't have the time or the processes in place to do that safely and securely. And obviously that has led to, risk for organisations. So an overview on NIS2, I think everybody's going to, along the same lines. So what you need to be looking at, cyber risk management, security and supply chain. So this is something we talk about a lot. A lot of organisations are looking what we talk to are looking very insular about making sure that their own cyber security posture is good and correct. But actually you need to be looking at the supply chain that you're working with as well and making sure that they're putting in place best practice around cyber security. And that's going to be even more important now with NIS2 directive coming out later on this year. So look at your supply chains, look at what they're doing, ask them the questions, challenge them on what they're doing, because it's going to be incredibly important to what you're doing as an organisation and how this can impact you. Business continuity management. Have you got a plan for business continuity? Is it documented? Are you partnering with somebody that can help you with that? If not, find those organisations, because again, that's going to be a very important part of what you're going to need going forward. Penetration testing. How good is what you've got in place already? Partner with an organisation or get an organisation to look at what you're doing within your network to ensure that what you think is safe and secure is actually as safe and secure as you think it's going to be. Reactions to incidents. So if you look at SOC and SIM services, we've made, and again, we talk about how our portfolio's evolved, we've made some acquisitions in the last 6 months to complement our SIM and SOC service part of our business, because obviously, along with NIS2, we've seen a huge growth and demand for those types of services. And network security, real-time detection of attacks, really understanding what's going on from a network security perspective, having that bird's eye view of what's going on, and be able to react in real time and detect in real time the threats that are out there. So you've got to do all of this. However, one of the huge challenges that we're seeing at the moment is a real cybersecurity, for want of a better word, business gap, skills gap within our industry. Security, cost of conventional security is increasing, and with that, alert fatigue, all these different pillars that make up your security setup, you need people behind those technologies to manage them, to train them, to learn them, to understand them. You've also got a huge explosion of exposure points, because I'm sure the majority of you, all of you probably in this room, have either a fully remote or a hybrid approach to how you work now. So that brings its own challenges. So there's a shortage of skills. And I can't imagine many of the people in this room from an end customer perspective are being told by your organisations, you've got all of this to deal with, oh, and by the way, here's some more money to do it. I'd imagine in a lot of cases you're being asked to do everything you've done previously, everything you've got to do going forwards, but you've got to do it with, if not the same amount of money, but maybe a reduced amount as well. So all of those challenges mean that, it's becoming a very difficult place to be. So, responsibility and guidance. So your company or institution, you need to judge yourself based on the criteria, industry elements and the size and consideration of your organisation. Stricter liability as well. And obviously that liability can mean it could be expensive for you. This piece to clarify accountability. So for a number of years we've been talking to, when I meet with end customers, making sure that you're getting cybersecurity into the conversation when you're talking to the C-suite within the business. If you're an IT manager and you've got a C-suite that aren't involved or aren't on board with what you need to do from a cyber perspective, it's very challenging. With the directives that have come out because of NIS2, I would hope this becomes a lot easier for you, because it's very much on their plate if this stuff isn't addressed, because they're going to be held responsible. The increased requirement for risk management and resilience. So again, making sure you've got the right solutions in place to understand and understand your risk and what that risk is and how you can reduce it. As I've talked about previously, you have to look at your supply chain. So supply chain management is very important. So for those of you that are working with organisations, make sure and understand what they're doing. Understand your risk, you know, and put a solution in place that's going to help you from that risk perspective. A couple of colleagues already have talked about access control. We've obviously got encryption in there, network security. There's a lot for you to deal with and a lot for you to look at. And I would say that, you know, there's over Canalis reported back in 2022, there's now just over 1,200 managed service partners in Ireland. That number this year is due to increase by about 9%. If you're not already partnered with a managed service organisation in Ireland, I would do it, because there's a lot that you've got to worry about. Not one technology that anyone will talk about today will be a silver bullet and will sort out your NIS2 directive issues and make you compliant, for a better word. So partnering with somebody that can help you on that journey and maybe take away some of that heavy lifting and bring some of that expertise in that maybe you don't have in your organisation or maybe haven't got the budget for, is going to help you. And it will probably help demystify a lot of this as well for you, because they'll be living and breathing this day in, day out and have the tools in place. And again, the reporting element of this as well. So you've got to be reporting procedures in place, make sure that you know what's going on in the network, make sure you know what's going on, where your risk is, and how you can deal with it and how you can rectify it. So from our standpoint, you've got to know the unknown. So a lot of what we see now is unknown threats coming into the network. And unless you've got a technology in place that can help you identify them, you're going to have a situation that's probably not going to be very pleasant. Central management of as much of your network and of much of the technologies within your network as possible. So when you're looking to partner with managed service providers, I would also be looking at what technologies, because again, as I talked about, not one technology is going to sort this problem for you, or one solution. So looking at how the technologies that you're looking at bringing into your network integrate together. Again, the more they integrate and the more they play nicely together, that's going to make your life a lot easier. If you choose to go on this journey yourself or for a managed service partner, making sure that whatever you're putting into your network, it can share information between it. It can make, they're not silo technologies, because that isn't going to make for a very simple solution for you. Scanning encrypted traffic. Over 80% of the internet now is encrypted, so you need to be making sure you're scanning that and have a mechanism to do that. And also, we're talking about potentially having a budget that's not getting any bigger but going to have to go further. Look at your overall architecture. How are you managing, and who are you working with in all the areas of your network, and what could you be doing to make sure that you are, you know, spending your money in the right areas and making your budget go further. We release a threat report, so the team at Renaissance can provide you with this. We release it twice a year, and this will provide you with some interesting stats around what we see through our global threat network around the areas of concern for organisations for the next year, 2 years ahead. So where we're seeing increases in particular types of attacks, certain types of areas of vulnerability within our customers' networks, all of this is documented in the threat report. So if you want to come past our stand, we can get you a copy of this sent out, or talk to the team at Renaissance. It will help you build and help you have that conversation with the C-suite within your business around where that threat report or where that threat is. Unknown threats. So again, the data that we see continues to show that never seen before threats are out there. Malware threats are out there. There was a decrease from last year, but actually what we're seeing now is that the threat actors, the threat hunters are providing or finding variants that work and sticking with them. So they're not necessarily needing to introduce new ones. They're basically just going with what they know works and gets them the best return. Encrypted threats, again, huge increase on this in this particular area, 117%. So when you're looking at building out your network architecture to make you or help you become compliant, what are you doing around protecting yourself from encrypted threats? So just to summarise, a couple more slides. If you look at how we can address the present, and again, some of my colleagues have already talked about this. So enabling MFA, that's a very simple, simple thing. Everyone should be doing that. Patching promptly. If you're not patching properly, there's a vulnerability out there and you're not patching against it, you're leaving yourself open. Conduct regular security assessments. If you're all working in an office, they'll have a fire drill at some point, I'm sure, and you'll all have to go and stand in the car park and they'll take a register and let you back in 15, 20 minutes later. Imagine that in that scenario for yourselves as well. What are you doing around assessing your current security posture and making sure that what you've got in place is working? The human element, make sure you're engaged with someone that can provide you with security training. All the technology in the world, there's still a huge element of it that's down to human error. So making sure that your team and the people around you understand the risk and understand best practice when working within the organisation. Scan that encrypted traffic. I think that's very important. 117% increase from last year, so that's a very important piece you need to be doing as well. Extend your protection to the cloud. More and more people are moving to the cloud and taking advantage of cloud services, but are you doing your due diligence and making sure that the services you're taking in the cloud have got the necessary security solutions and protections in place as well? Very busy slide, which I'm not going to talk too much about in the interest of time. But if you imagine now you've got, whether you're a data center, whether you're in the branch, whether you're a remote home user, you've got solutions in the cloud, maybe you've got some stuff in public cloud. All of these areas need to be considered. We're not, as I said, we're not the one-stop shop that's going to answer every single one of these issues, but these are all areas that you need to be considering. Review your security architecture, make sure that you're getting value for money, making sure that the organisations and the vendors that make up your architecture, as I said, work well together, integrate together, take away some of that heavy lifting. Get your security standards, basic security standards right. Make sure you're patching, making sure you're inspecting encrypted traffic, making sure you're engaged with a company that can help you from a SIEM or a SOC service, manage detection and response on your endpoint. All of these areas will come from a number of different vendors and organisations, but it will make this a lot easier and will help you build a security standard. And make sure you're looking at those unknown threats as well, because they're unknown, and ultimately, if they're into your network, they're going to be compromising what you do. So make sure you're doing something around that. Finally, and I'll be very quick because I've got a 1-minute sign from the back. So key takeaways. Make sure leadership is on board. So C-suite, it's absolutely paramount now that they're on board and on the journey to make sure that you're compliant and adhering to NIS2. So you have to make sure that they're on board, get them in front of people that can help you get their attention, or partner with an organisation, a managed service provider that can help you with that. Make sure you've got a good security strategy in place, cybersecurity strategy in place. Understand your risk, make sure you've got good monitoring in place as well, and rehearse this. Document everything. If you're going to have an incident, is it documented as to how you're going to respond to it? Have a plan in place. Thank you very much.
How are you doing? There was a few brave people in here that actually read the directive. Who was that again? Can I test some of you on your homework? No? When you look at the directive itself, of all the different types of cybercrime and malware that could happen, what is the one that is called out by name in the directive? Correct, ransomware. Why is that? Does anyone know?
It's the most impactful threat nowadays.
Genius. It is the most disruptive, the most damaging, and by far the most costly of any threat that happens. And the NIS directive is built to protect organizations from that happening, because we're wasting a lot, partly. Thank you for that correction. But it's a lot of money. This morning, there's a very interesting news article on United Healthcare in the States. They were hit by ransomware, 872 million so far, and we reckon it's the first ransomware attack that's going to cost more than $1 billion. So that's what we're up against here. My lovely colleagues talked a lot about the directive and were diving into details on it. I'm going to talk about how it pertains to ransomware particularly. So if we look at it, what are the impacts of the NIS directive? Well, there's quite significant fines, and the board of essential companies now can be held liable, right? So if they don't prepare and do what was meant to be done, they can't run a business again in that aspect. So it's quite significant, the challenges that are coming up now. And really, it is time now for IT security to move out of the IT team and move into the business. We need to recognize it as a very, very important part of the overall business. Okay, so if we look at the overview once more, we have the old directive and the new directive, and there's two different groups. I'm guessing that most of you are in here because you belong to one of the two groups, or you're just keen on EU directives for whatever reason. So in essence, the goals here, of course, is to increase cyber resilience overall, reduce the resilience inconsistency, and to improve joint situational awareness. And again, if we look at the practical tips before we talk about companies and ransomware and what they should be doing, you can educate your staff, your management, and your board level. They will need to understand this directive if they don't do already, because it's going to be impacting them going forward. Like I think it was Tristan talked about talking to your existing vendors, find out what it is that they do and specifically how they will help with the NIS2. I will talk specifically about how we help with the ransomware issue. Then you need to consider and understand the impact of the personal liability provision, and you need to practice. How many in here have done tabletop exercises before? Great. How many in here have tested ransomware? Great. Did you run a zero-day ransomware in your production environment to test? No. Enough said, nobody does. Nobody understands what the impact is going to be. Nobody even knows if the preventative solutions they have in place will work, and nobody knows whether the backups will work, because we don't know what happens in between and what the criminals are going to do. Sorry, did you have a question?
But we can run it in the QA environment.
We can?
One-to-one to the production environment.
We can. Good. And we should be doing it. So we'll talk a little bit more about assessments later on, but trust me, there's a lot of organizations that are not doing what you're suggesting here today still. Okay, what's important with ransomware is that ransomware happens incredibly quickly. If you have a server encrypting, they can encrypt easily up to 50,000 files per minute, so a lot of data will disappear very quickly. And if you're reliant on systems to tell you that something is going wrong, and then a human interaction, there is a lot of risk that is not going to help you in time. Also, many of these attacks happen between 8 p.m. in the evening and 6 p.m. in the morning for a reason. The IT staff is not around. They happen over the weekend. They happen on the holidays when IT staff is not around. So when it comes to ransomware, the key thing is really automation. You need systems in place that can take actions on your behalf and shut down the right users and the right devices that has begun that encryption. And if you have it today, if you don't have that today, you know, the likelihood is that you're going to lose a lot of data because you simply can't react quickly enough. And then you need to go into restoration, and many companies grossly underestimate how long it takes to restore a terabyte or a petabyte or multiple terabytes or petabytes of data. So these are just some things to have into consideration. If we look at what we've been doing for years, we've been doing two things. We have our prevention on one side that's trying to stop the ransomware from getting in, and then we have our backups to help us with resiliency. And in the old days, we started with antivirus, and we've added multiple layers of prevention-based security. The big talk now is PAM, it's Zero Trust, it's all of these solutions that we need in place. But the truth of the matter is, I'm not saying a bad word about any of these solutions. But when you look at it, we've been implementing all of these solutions, and today in 2024, Organizations have more of them in place than they ever had before. However, we see more ransomware attacks that are successful in 2024 than we have at any other point in history. So they do a very good job. They genuinely stop hundreds of thousands of threats, but they will not stop everything. There will be stuff that gets through, and that's why you need to be prepared. This curve has gone the same way for a very long time, and it's costing the world economy up to $6 trillion now. If that was a country, it would be after US and China as the third biggest economy in the world. So that's how much money we're coughing up to the criminals. We need to take ransomware very, very seriously going forward. The issue with prevention-based solutions is not so much an issue, but if all of your eggs is in the prevention basket, it requires you to be 100% effective 100% of the time across the entire attack surface that you are trying to protect and against all of the threats that are out there. And in today's world, that's really, really difficult. And that's why all the analytics companies, Gartner, Forrester, say it's not if, it's when, because they realize that stuff can break through. So you can have all of these solutions in place. And if I'm a hacker and I go after Microsoft Scheduled Task Manager, or I go after an RDP session and I manage to get in, and I use tools like Cobalt Strike or Mimikatz to move laterally across the network and scrape credentials, sooner or later, I'm going to get across an admin credential. Now I'm on an RDP session with admin credentials. I can do the same as your IT team. I can uninstall software. I can install software. I can stop and start processes from running. And guess which processes I'm going to turn off before I start the encryption and before I start the exfiltration of data. It's very, very difficult to stop. So we need to do something else. And that's the point that we're coming to today. So today, everybody has preventative solutions in place. You have your perimeter, your email gateway, your web gateway, your firewalls. You have your modern EDR solutions. You have SIEM systems. You have SOC centers. And on the other side of that, you have your backup solutions. The missing link here really is containment solutions. You need something that can discover that encryption as soon as it begins so you can save your data. Think about it. If you can contain the damage of encryption when it begins to 20 files, you're going to recover in no time. If you have terabytes or petabytes that needs to be recovered, it's going to take you literally, days, if not weeks, in some instances, to be back. On average, when an organization goes down to ransomware today, they're down for 24 days. So that has a big impact on the organization, not just in cost of cleanup, but in loss of revenue, in reputational damage, brand integrity damage. You need to pay consultants. You need to report under GDPR, NIS2, DORA, whatever regulation you're bound by. It is massive money. So it is a very, very good idea to put containment in place as that missing link. So if we look at it in sort of on a high-level overview, you've got essentially the layers that are in place. So at the top, you've got your, can't walk away from this, of course, just realized. You've got your perimeter protection that filters out a lot of the malware that comes into the organization. If anything fools or bypasses the perimeter protection, then we've got our endpoint security. It was antivirus, then it changed name to next-gen antivirus, then it became EDR, XDR, MDR. But the point of those solutions is to pick up malware, identify them, and stop them from executing in your environment. And they will hopefully do that, but I do use the word hopefully deliberately, because if these two layers of security always worked, we wouldn't see any ransomware attacks anywhere in the world. And we see more than we've ever seen before. Below that, you have a layer of data storage and critical IT infrastructure. So here we're talking your SAN and NAS, your virtual infrastructure from VMware or Microsoft, your domain controllers. If a domain controller is encrypted, what are you going to do? Your company is down. It's database servers, application servers, everything. This layer down here at the bottom is important for a number of different reasons. The first reason that layer is important is this layer down here at the bottom is basically where each one of your users in the endpoint layer will go to access data when they need to do their day-to-day job. it's also important because that layer at the bottom is where you should be storing intellectual property, PII, personally identifiable information. Anything that is dear to your company should be stored centrally in that layer, preferably in an encrypted format where you control the encryption key. The third reason why that layer down there is super important is, guess what? That's the layer that the ransomware gangs are after. They don't care about your tablets, your laptops, your endpoint devices. If they get to that layer down there at the bottom, they cripple everybody in the organization and nobody is able to do any work for up to 24 days on average. So very, very important. What we do at Bullwall is we provide basically, you can liken it, if you look up into the ceiling here, you've got smoke detectors. If there's a fire in this building, the sprinkler system will come on and turn the fire out. That's pretty much what we do in your data center. So we have a number of sensors that work in combination to build up an alert score, and when that alert score is high enough, we are positive that illegitimate encryption has begun in your environment. So we protect all of the critical IT infrastructure, both on-prem and in the cloud. We do that without installing agents anywhere. We just need a single virtual server to stand up in the environment. And from that point on, we provide 24/7 automated response. So if encryption begins, we detect it, we respond to it, we provide a list of the few files that got encrypted, which user, which device, and the exact location of those files. And we provide the reporting for you under GDPR, NIS2, DORA, and all of those regulations that you now need to be compliant with. We will give you the list. If any of those files contained intellectual property or PII, that would be a full data breach under GDPR, for instance, and you will need to list that within what was 72 hours, which is not going to be, now going to be 24 hours. And imagine how easy, in inverted commas, that's going to be for a company that's had all of their data encrypted. You can't report on that within 24 hours. How would you do it? I see a few nodding heads, so at least one or two agree with me. That's good. Okay, so it is incredibly important to test your infrastructure. We provide a free ransomware assessment test to any company that is interested. And what we do is we will ask you to stand up a virtual server. We will populate a folder on that server with some dummy data, and we will use one of your clients, and then we will run 4 live ransomware attacks. We've obviously reversed engineered, so it can't spread anywhere. It can only go after that folder. We will run 4 different types of ransomware, both known and unknown, so 0-day included. And when we run that in your environment, to begin with, we won't enable our solution because it'll tell you whether your EDR picks up on it, whether any of your SIEM systems react to the fact that encryption has begun. And once we've carried out those first 4 tests, then we enable our solution and we show you the difference. We've carried out 4,000 of those globally so far in our existence, and we've yet to see all of the tests that we do be picked up by anyone. And it mimics a real-life scenario. With prevention-based security, they do a fabulous job if they can recognize a signature, a pattern, or a behavior of malware. But if they see something for the first time, guess what? That efficacy drops right off the cliff, and there's a very good chance that it goes through. And that's notwithstanding all of the different ways that the criminals can get in and circumvent systems in your environment. So come see a demo at the stand if you want. You can book a live demonstration, you can book a live assessment and find out for real whether you are protected against ransomware or not. Thank you very much.
I somehow feel like I got the short straw, to be fair, at the end of quite a long session. So thanks for hanging in there. I'll keep my chat pretty brief, and then hopefully we have plenty of time for the Q&A, so we can make this a bit more interactive. Whilst I'm giving you bad news, people that were in my DORA session earlier, you've probably noticed there is a lot of similarity between NIS2 and DORA, so you may already know some of this stuff. But for those of you that weren't, just a little introduction to Security Scorecard. The kind of company name explains what we do, right? We grade the security of companies. We provide an A to F scoring system that looks at the resilience of an organization, be that yourself, but also importantly, your suppliers. And whether it's NIS2 or DORA or ISO, all of these frameworks talk about the need to protect your supply chain because increasingly we rely on third parties to deliver business services, we outsource business functions, we share sensitive data with them, and our perimeter is not just our own, it extends out into that extended supply chain. So just to summarize the aspects of the framework that Security Scorecard can support you in, goes without saying, third-party risk management, right? So the requirement to understand the risk that is posed by those interconnected organizations with your own company. That's very, very hard to do, right? And companies that do it today do it in a point-in-time manner, right? So I onboard a supplier, I send them a security questionnaire, I ask them to self-attest, you know, are you following best practices? Are you secure? They send it back, I file it away, and I never look at it again, right? And so there are some limitations to that self-attestation. What we provide you is an independent view, a way to assess for security that one step removed so that you can trust the results. Certainly doesn't replace that interaction with the supplier, right? But it gives you an independent validation. And then secondly, it gives you the ability to continuously assess, right? So as one aspect is, what's my security posture today? But of course, threats evolve, and where I am today is not the same as tomorrow, 6 weeks, 6 months, a year down the line. And when it comes to critical suppliers that you're relying on to deliver your business services, you need to see that volatility. You need to understand when that risk profile changes and be able to respond to that. The second element, the relative to Security Scorecard, is around asset management and understanding, you know, what that attack surface is, right? That becomes difficult in the current environment, particularly because people can spin up and down instances of infrastructure very, very easily, right? Like it's not difficult for me to extend that attack surface, sometimes unknown to my colleagues in IT, or certainly, you know, marketing run a promotion and they create a whole new website for that particular purpose and someone forgets about it, right? And it's collecting data and we need to know it's secure. So the same volatility around threats is relative to our infrastructure, right? That is dynamic as well. That changes, and being able to understand that is critically important. From an incident reporting perspective, I'm not going to dwell on this too long, but it's because my colleagues have covered this quite well, right? But incident reporting is difficult in a short time frame, right? And particularly if I want to have an informed conversation about the impact of a particular incident, right? I need to know how I'm going to respond to that, both in terms of on the ground, technically, how am I going to detect, contain, you know, respond to the threat, but then also how am I going to communicate that externally, right? Because I'm going to have senior people in my business that need to talk to the media potentially about the impact. Do they know what to say? Do they know what the party line is? And so being able to not only discover the incident but understand the context and additional information about what's occurred becomes critically important when we start to look at directives like NIS2. And from a kind of organisational perspective, you know, it's very similar, right? It's the boardroom to the basement. We discussed that earlier in the DORA conversation that we had. You know, everyone needs to be involved. Everyone needs to know their role, and we need to know what the effectiveness of our security controls are, and we need to be testing that, and we need to be constantly in that mode of improvement. I think Morten sort of spoke very clearly and well to that idea. We want to stop as much as we can, but we also have to understand that there are going to be times that we need to detect and respond to particular issues, and are we continually enhancing our ability to do that? So just talking a little bit about third-party ecosystems for a while, right? They're complicated, right? Like it's difficult to know sometimes who all of the suppliers are that we work with, and really it's not. I would contest that you don't actually need to know every single person that you do any sort of business with, right? But you do need to know who those tier one critical suppliers are to your organization. That if something happens there, it's going to have a material impact on you, because you're not going to be able to deliver services, or your data is going to be compromised, right? So those critical suppliers, you really need to understand who they are and what their security resilience is as part of the NIS2 directive. And I guess kind of the good news, bad news is they then take that a little bit further and talk about nth parties. So not only do we have to know who our third parties are, but there are potentially suppliers of them that might impact us. And again, it's not about trying to boil the ocean. There's no need to know absolutely every fourth party that you do business with, but typically the use case here is around concentration risk, right? So I work with 100 critical tier one suppliers, and then I identify that of those, 40 of them rely on another organisation who I have no contractual relationship with, but clearly if I have 40 critical suppliers that are relying on them, then they are in my ecosystem, they are in scope, and they are an organisation that I need to be able to monitor and to potentially interact with. In terms of kind of validation and understanding security issues, which we spoke about previously, right, it's important to understand the underlying issues that exist within an organisation so that you can know of the potential impact. Part of what we do as an organisation is allow the vendors that you're assessing access to the information that we have about them in a complementary basis. So we're not trying to just beat people up, we're not trying to just report on issues, we want to guide people and enable you to understand the potential impact, but the supplier to understand how they can actually go away and fix it, right, and why they should care. Because they're ultimately improving their own resilience as well as yours. And one of the things we can do for anyone here today is provide you access to your scorecard on a complementary basis, so you can start to understand a little bit more about that. And in terms of additional information, it's also important to communicate why something's a risk, right? We don't just to tell someone to do something, right? Sometimes you have to actually explain as to why it's an issue, why you should care, and why and how it's going to measurably improve your security resilience by fixing these issues. When it comes to attack surface, one of the interesting things that we've seen as a company as we've evolved over the last 10 years or so is that we go out onto the public internet and we look at all of the assets that exist there. We essentially attribute those assets to companies and then look for threats, vulnerabilities, any misconfigurations, and then create that scorecard grade based on issues we've seen directly related to breach. Right? But what that actually means is over the last 10 years, we've pushed a lot of data to the side because it isn't relevant to the scoring that we do. And what we're seeing increasingly is organisations want to have access to that information, and we're making that available. So outside of just the scoring that we do, and the byproduct of that, particularly as it relates to attack surface and NIS2, is that we're scanning the public internet every single day. So every single day we scan and we see that volatility in assets that I mentioned earlier. We detect systems that are coming up and down and really give you the ability to manage that the dynamic nature of the internet and your infrastructure. So this will be familiar as well to some of you, right? Some of the areas that the directives talk about you needing to gather when it comes to incident management, you know, number of users, amount of data that's impacted, the geographical location or how that's spread, and also the economic impact. I mean, the example that Morten gave is very punchy, right? It's in your face, and you go, well, this is serious impact that incidents can have. Like the ability to contain and manage them and respond to them quickly is critically important. You're not going to avoid all of the issues all of the time, but you can prepare yourself in such a way that you can respond promptly and limit the impact as best you can. And part of limiting that is how do we recover, right? How do we get back online? How do we become operational again and really get the business back to normal in as swift a manner as possible? One final aspect to touch on as it relates to NIST, vulnerability assessments, penetration tests, great, everyone's doing them. How often do you change your provider? How effective are the tests that you're taking? And what are you doing with the output from that? Are you actually going away and making remediations? Are you taking actions, or are you just reporting? Because reporting is one element, mitigation is clearly as important. Let's take steps to do that. And then being more proactive in things. I believe my colleague Tristan at Sonic will spoke a little bit about this, right? Red teaming, tabletop exercises. How are you preparing yourselves to put yourself in the best possible position to recover from these incidents, to contain and recover and gather the information that you need? So last quick slide for you. So, right, I work for a software vendor, right? I'd like people to buy our software. That would make me very happy. But one of the things we also do is we give our license on a complementary basis to a number of information sharing organisations related to critical national infrastructure. So any organisation that's part of one of these information sharing organisations has access to all of the data that we have about them, so that they can take steps to protect themselves. So I wanted to mention that, because if you have customers, or if you're in any of the industries affected by NIS, then know that you can have access to that information and improve your resilience on a complementary basis, as long as you say nice things about us, of course. So I skipped through that pretty quickly, because I know we're kind of tight on time, and I think we wanted to allow for some Q&A. But yeah, on a serious note, thanks for your attention. I know it's been a long hour and a half so far. Hang with us for the next 10 minutes, and hopefully we can have some good interaction and some good questions.
Okay. Can we just show of hands for questions for the guys? Does anybody want to ask a question to each of the five guys? Okay, right. You were first.
I would say it's not just a question, but more like a command, because I'm coming from European Commission, actually, just a recent meeting there. As we have seen, it's a 3 key articles in the NIS2, 3 key articles for the impacted entities. But if you look on them precisely, because this is how the European Union does, it's 33 requirements. It's very complex. But nevertheless, and if you look on them, and I think the industry will agree with me, there is no a single solution on the table to cover NIS2. Agree? Yeah. So typically your environment will be more complex in the future. You cannot go alone. You will need to be multi-vendor at a certain point. You cannot stand the battle against the cybercrime in the future. So that was my comment.
Interesting. Did anybody want to ask a question from each of the speakers? The same question for each of the speakers, or have you all got specific questions? Okay. Great.
It's kind of a vague question, I guess. My organization, one of the things we're focusing on is software bill of materials, managing that as part of the third-party risk and the software supply chain risk associated, I guess. I wanted to ask how your organizations are tackling things like software bill of materials management, providing that to customers, what your stances are on that.
Okay. Who wants to go first? Well, you were first, so we'll ask you first.
I'm not sure I got the question.
Okay. Does anyone really? You said you'd like to answer the question.
No, actually, because I'm not sure I have much to say on that one at the moment.
Okay. It's obviously a good question.
It is a good question.
I feel like, because I work for Security Scorecard, who are a supply chain third-party due diligence company, I should at least respond, although the reality is we don't do very much in that space. Just more generally around procurement and kind of preparing in that way, we are seeing that more mature organisations from a third-party risk perspective are building in these assessments very, very early in the process, and it's not so much waiting for the security teams to get involved, but it is the procurement teams at that initial phase of selecting and onboarding a new supplier, but starting to take ownership of that initial kind of assessment and check. So it doesn't directly answer your question, but hopefully useful to some degree.
Okay. It is an interesting question, and I think a lot of the worry I have from it coming from a procurement side is there's already a one-size-fits-all type solution out there. And if you're a software as a service provider with a very specific service, you can end up being assessed as if you were providing a range of services in a very complex environment. And you're not dealing with the people who understand that, so it could be even more challenging in that regard. So I think it might be a business opportunity there.
Next.
We have another microphone there. So
Yeah, my question is to Bullwall. So how do they distinguish between a normal encryption and encryption through ransomware?
So we do a machine learning when we roll out. So just so you know, this whole thing is coming in October. The normal rollout phase of a Bullwall solution is 6 to 8 weeks. We will install on a single server, and we will enable a machine learning phase that is always on, and it learns all of the good traffic in your environment, including if you're using good encryption algorithms. That could be PGP or BitLocker or whatever you're using today. So we can quite easily distinguish between the encryption that you do and the illegitimate encryption that the ransomware gangs are doing. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks.
Next. Any more questions? There's one just there. Thanks.
It's not really directly related to anyone in particular, but a lot of your products are very much IT focused or focused on the IT environments. From a utility standpoint or an OT standpoint, what do you see are probably the nuances to NIS2 and the offerings out there to on the OT network?
I mean, from our perspective at Bullwall, we cover both normal IT environments and OT environments as well. So that's fairly sweet and simple as an answer, I would say.
Yes, we see more and more use cases, in fact, on our side. For example, privileged access, PAM for IT and PAM for OT. We see more and more third-party access use cases to the OT environment. And we see also in the OT environment, you know, the IT is quite standardized. You've got Windows, Linux, web, and that's it. When you look at the OT environment, it's very diversified. You find a variety of many systems, and it's not so easy to tackle the security of the remote access. So it takes different types of technology, like end-to-end tunneling, for example. And the different OT providers are very also different from what they enable or not. Some of them, for example, you cannot do without a VPN. You cannot, because they use very low-level network packets and so on. So you find a large variety, a broad variety of many things. So, but we see more and more the need for PAM for OT, yes, and we address this need too.
Any other questions out there? Good. Okay, another one over here.
The whole conversation about OT, actually. So I have the question to the vendors, because let's talk about OT. And I heard that somebody mentioned that we can protect OT. I'm wondering, how are you going to protect PLC from Siemens PSC7? It's a compute unit on the manufacturing line. How are you going to protect it? From the ransomware. We've seen a lot of malware popping up now and there.
So in terms of technology, we combine two two things can help in preventing ransomware to go through. For example, you've got the zero trust technology with, for example, protocol break, okay? And we leverage also virtualization technology. The containerization that has been mentioned is a way to do it also, so that you isolate completely the end user terminal from the system, and you just render images, and the only flow that goes through is only the mouse and the keyboard flow. You don't.
But the PLC is not a mouse, a keyboard.
No, but then you've got different use cases. You don't access the PLC directly, or you access the web application of the PLC, you access the TIA portal of Siemens, for example, that access to the PLC. You don't necessarily access the PLC.
My question was how to protect the PLC itself, because it's a compute unit.
Okay, from the internal network, you mean?
Yeah, even from the vendor coming for the maintenance, inserting USB in it with a malware.
We could probably sell tickets to this regulator vendor in the red corner. Okay, so probably let you guys continue that discussion later on. Just before we wrap up, is there any further questions? Okay, on that basis, thanks very much, and enjoy your lunch.